All right, welcome back to another video. This video is going to be on finding square roots. We are in the 8th grade book of Unit 9. So this is 8th 9.1. Our learning intention is to understand the concept of a square root of a number, and you'll know you're successful with that when you can find square roots of a number, when you can evaluate expressions involving square roots, and when you can use square roots to solve equations. So what is a square root? A square root is a number that, when multiplied by itself, gives you the squared number. So it looks like this. So you have your radical sign, that's what this is called. And then the radicand is that number on the inside. And that square root equals a number squared. So the number squared equals p. That sounds a little confusing, but think about it this way. If I have the square root of 25, I'm looking for the number that would be squared, or the number times itself that equals 25. And I know 5 times 5, or 5 squared, is 25, which would be my p. So my answer for the square root of 25 would be 5. So I'm just trying to figure out what number squared equals the number that's inside of my radical sign. So there's a few different ways to represent square roots. If you're representing a positive square root, you'll just write it with the radical sign and the radicand inside. If you want to represent it as a negative square root, you're going to put the negative sign on the outside of the square root. And if you want to represent both square roots, you're going to put the positive and negative sign over top of each other just like this. And then when we solve, we know it will either be, in my example above, it would have been a positive 5 or a negative 5. Okay, so we would represent it in that way. And so here's some examples of that here. This one is just positive square root of the positive square root of 25, because 5 squared equals 25, then the square root of 25 is 5. This one's the negative square root, so the negative square root of 49, because 7 squared is 49, the negative square root of 49 would be negative 7. And then this one's positive and negative square root of 16, because 4 squared is 16. The positive and negative square root of 16 is negative 4 and 4. Okay, so you're going to try a couple of those on your own down here. So I want you to tell me what is the square root of 4. So what number multiplied by itself, or squared, means the same thing, right, would come to 4. Whatever that number is, that's your answer for the square root of 4. What is the negative square root of 81? So what number squared equals 81? And then you're going to make sure it's a negative. What is the positive and negative square root of 64? So what number squared or multiplied by itself equals 64? And then you're going to give me a positive and negative variation of that number. Okay, let's turn it around and look at the other side. Finding more square roots. So it gets a little bit more complex, but really it's not super challenging if you understand what you're doing. So here I have the square root of 9/16. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to look at each of those numbers individually in this problem, because I know there is a number times itself, or a number squared, that equals 9. I can say 3, right? 3 squared is 9. And I know that 4 squared is 16. So the square root of 9/16 would actually be 3/4, because I just did this. I found the square root of each of those numbers and simplified it down. So because 3/4 squared equals 9/16, then the square root of 9/16 equals 3/4. Here's another example for you. This is plus or minus the square root of 2.25. Because 1.5 squared is 2.25, then the plus or minus the square root of 2.25 is either negative 1.5 and it's 1.5. Okay, so I was able to figure out what squared will equal this number, And that's how I found that answer. Okay? So you're going to try that here for these. See what you can figure out for those 3 problems. Here's a little helpful tip for you. When you're squaring a number and finding a square root, they undo each other. So essentially they're like inverse operations. Okay? So for example, you can use this relationship to express a value, and you can use this to evaluate expressions. Wow. So if the square root of 4 squared, so I already have the square root of 4 squared is the square root of 16, right? That's essentially, I'm just saying, what is this number? So that would be 4. And if I have the square root of 4 and I square that square root, then I'm just undoing it. So I'm basically just taking away the square root and the squared number and coming up with my original number that was underneath the radical sign. All right, so evaluating expressions with square roots. This is something that you're going to work on your own, but I'm going to give you some help on this first one. So when you're looking at this, here is our expression. 5 times the square root of 36 plus 7, okay? So I'm going to go 5 times, what is the square root of 36? Well, I know 6 times 6 is 36, so then the square root of 36 is 6 plus 7. So 5 times 6, what is that? That is 30 plus 7. My answer is 37. Okay, you're going to look here. What is the square root of 81 squared? Remember, this is one of those that undo each other. So if I'm asking you for the square root of a squared number, I'm just going to take the number inside. What is the square root of this? It's 2. 2 squared is 4. So essentially, I'm just going to say this is 81, right? Because if I find the square root of 81, it's 9. And then I square that, I get 81 again. So it's going to be 81 minus 5. So try these 2 problems on your own. Then we're going to do solving equations using square roots. So this one says x squared equals 81. Okay, so I need to figure out what number times itself or squared equals 81. Well, I know 9 squared is 81. So I'm going to go 9 squared equals 81. Okay, so you're going to try these similar problems and see what you can come up with. Remember, you're going to need to divide by 3 on both sides before you can solve for the a squared. All right, good luck.